the latest version 3.0.5.
It is only for NetBeans.
It is only for NetBeans, right? It integrates with the NetBeans, doesn't come with its own ID. So I think that's fine. If they have gone to the next level and decided not to have ID, then it's fine. I think, and you are all familiar with NetBeans. So hopefully the speed and everything, all those issues are also dealt with.
There's some other difference. In NetBeans, what they do is just they extend the NetBeans actually. NetBeans is the next step on the access. So we want to do something. There's a different coding style.
Coding style is, so can you explain me what is the difference? The code will be the same, right? The syntax of Java,
There was something the extend file which is Java and it was different one. We can use some other
So I haven't used it. I will also download the latest version and try to do it. But this is the code? Not really. So this code will probably not work. Is that what you're saying? This one?
It is not extending midlet.
So I need to test it out. Have you tried 3.0? So I think that website also puts the older version. And is that working? That is working. For some of you, I think it's not working for you. The older version 3.0 was not working. So I am okay with 3.0. It comes with ID. We have used it. I am using it. It works fine. So you can use it. But I then need to download the latest version 3.0.5 and see what's happening. Anybody tried to write the code? Not yet. So since now just started and I think add drop everything is over. So I think now I can start giving assignments and so on. So Midlet, it's an application. Java has something called a servlet. There is an applet, and now this is a midlet. Right? So it extends this microedition.midlet.midlet. It's an abstract class. It's the parent class. Yeah. Extends. I think probably this is not a midlet. Okay. So let me check. So I would recommend for now go with 3.0 version, download it and use it. I have to check this latest version. I haven't checked it. Otherwise there is still an older version, which is WTK, wireless toolkit. It is 2 point something. Even that is fine. So I need to check the 3.0.5. So last time we discussed three functions: start app, pause app, and destroy app. So start app is something that gets called when the midlet first starts, and whenever it is paused, again when it resumes, there is a start app. Right? So in the program you have to make sure, and I will give you an example about what we can do to find out whether the program is running for the first time or it is being resumed for something. Then there is a pause app. So because we just have one screen, a lot of applications will be paused. So there is one thread that being used for the display of screen, which is the system thread. So the operating system owns that thread and it is in control of it. So whatever you see on the screen is just one thread. Now what happens is when you start your own application, the operating system gives you the control of this thread to you. Right? So now you are running in that thread your own code, and whatever you want to display in the UI, you are using that thread. So that's why whenever a call comes, operating system wants this thread back. Because it wants to display there is an incoming call, whose call is it, whether you want to accept it or not. So all of that thing, it needs that same thread back. So that's why it will call you a pause app, and it will give you a chance to do something so that you can quickly close if you want to do something, or even close the application, you can do that. And then take this control back to the incoming call. It will display everything, and then when it is done, it will call the start app. So So this is how it is done. And when at the end, when the user says quit or the operating system wants to quit your application, it will call the destroyer. Okay? And there is version of destroyer, and we'll see what are the different versions of destroyer. So all of these methods are callbacks. So just like you listen for events for the mouse, if you have written code in Java that handle mouse events, you will know that whenever there is an event, whenever the mouse moves, you get an event. Right? You are not continuously listening for the mouse, where the mouse is and whether it is moving. So it's all event driven, and that's what it is called a callback. Operating system will call back. So you will never start anything. There is no main function and you will start. Even the start tab is called by the operating system. So the basic, most simplest code will look like this. So you import the midlet, that class, and then you extend it. And then you just write start tab, pause app, and destroy app. And there is this version. There is a boolean unconditional. We'll see what this means. But this is the simplest code. You can write this code and compile and see what happens. Maybe you can try it in the latest version, 0.5, and see what happens. But that doesn't give you any screen, right? So what if you want to show something on the screen? Then there are ready-made classes in this DUI, user interface package. Right? So you can also, there is a form, there is button, just like in HTML. You create an HTML page and you get lots of options. You can have a text box, you can have a drop-down box, you can have radio buttons. All of those things also come built in for the phone. The simplest thing is, I think this was using form, right? Frame. So not it. So you can create an HTML-like form. Most of the time, the user will input something, put some numbers. So for example, the phone number, SMS message, text. So you can create a simple form. So one thing is you can put a text box where you can put all the characters, and it uses the display class, and this is important. So basically this is representing the entire screen of your phone, the display class. So whatever you put in the display will be displayed. And you can have multiple of these displays. So on the touch screen, if you're seeing that when you swipe, you see one screen. Then you swipe and you go to the next screen and something else is displayed. Right? So these are all different things with the display. So you can see one display is form, another display is, let's say, form B, form C, form D. And when user swipes it, you can change these forms into the display, and then everything gets displayed as a new thing. So if most of the code is the same, it's just that you create a new form, give some name to this, and then you say get display this and set current edge. So what we are doing is, this is your display that is shown on the screen on the phone, and you get that the version of this, and then you set the current form as the display. And if you change this set current to a different form, it will show a different form. Right? So depending upon, and all these touch events, this will also come as an event. So I don't have that yet. I am not listening for any commands from the user in this particular application. But if I have a command listener or something like a mouse listener that you know, then in that I can find out whether the user has swiped it. So when user feeds in any input, I can change the display. Right? So if I say the touch is going from left to right, I can put another form. If it is going from right to left, I can put another form. So this is how you can change displays very fast. Okay, so in the previous version, the user was not doing anything. It was just displaying something and that's it. Now if you want to have something where you need a command, then what you do is, let me see. So you take a command listener. But what happens with the command listener, it's really challenging. Some phones have buttons, some phones have touch screen, and some phones have both the things. You can open the phone and you can touch it also, and there's a button also. So now it becomes really challenging for the user. If you say there is OK and quit, these are the two buttons that you want, then there will be displayed somewhere, and which is the input now? Right? So you are saying the point, so if I touch it, I can touch it. But then what happens is, some of the phones don't have touch, they have buttons. And the buttons could be different. Something could be a red button for end, but then that could be mapped to something else. Right? So what happens is you write the code in an abstract way, saying I want this button and this button, and you don't care about what is the exactly physical button on the phone that will get pressed. So your code is abstracted out, and phone will take care of which button is pressed and which is mapped to what, because phone will know where it is displaying that option, quit option, on the left side or on the right side, and which is the button that was mapped to it. So phone will take care, operating system will take care of this, and you will just get an event. And this is how you can write code in Java and it will run on most of the phones without worrying about what are the buttons there on that phone, particular model. Right? So many phones have soft buttons, unlabeled buttons. So that means these buttons have different meaning in different contexts. So the same button can switch on the phone or switch off the phone, and the same button can end the call and so on. Right? So depending upon the context, the meaning changes, and the same thing will work for your application. So there is a command listener, so I will show you the code also, and then the listener has a single method called command action, which is called when the command is invoked. So whenever the user presses a command, you get this. Let me show you the code here. So I implement command listener. Anybody knows what's the meaning of implements? It's an interface. Right? So what's the meaning of interface?
You have to give your own definition.
Right. So that interface just says what will be the functions, right? And it will give you the function name. But then the class that you are implementing, if it is implementing that interface, it has to provide the real implementation of that. Right? So when I say implements command listener, then it's my obligation to write function or the actual code for command action. So at the bottom, you have command action with two options, command C and displayable D. Right? So any guesses what these two things are, command C and displayable D? I'm not playing. So let's start with a simple thing. What will be this command C? Command that has been pressed, right? Now what would be the displayable D? If you remember the display thing.
On the
Screen. So what will happen is you really don't know which screen it is showing on the phone. The user could be swiping in and swiping out and going from one screen to another screen. And what is the current screen you don't know. So you need to get a handle of what the user is seeing, and in that what is the command it is pressing. Right? So that's why the both things. So for me right now, let's assume there is just one display screen. So I don't care about the displayable detail. I just come to C is equal to M exit command. So this is saying if it's an exit command, you can see. So before coming here, what I have done is M exit command. So I created a new command with this label exit. So it will show up on the screen. And then it's a command.exit, it's the standard command. Right? And so 0 you can ignore for now. And then you add this command to form. So just like in HTML, if you create an HTML form, you can add these buttons. Similarly, you add this command, exit command, into the form, and you say set command listener this. So this class will be listening for the commands now. Okay, so these are the three new things. This is we already discussed. And then finally, if now the user presses this button, exit command. So first of all, let's say if you have many commands, exit or menu, then you have to compare what exactly is being pressed. So if it's a menu, you say C is equal to that menu command. You do something else, but for exit now, what you do is you call the destroyer equal and true. So we'll discuss what true means later, and then notify destroy. So that kills the application. So there is one way. This is one simple way to add functionality of a command. So now we have seen what the display is and what the command is in that. Any questions? So this is a very short thing about writing a code. So now what you can do is, as I will give you an assignment also, so you just write a hello world, and then in hello world you will have two options. One is the of course exit, and one is the menu, right? And the menu If somebody presses menu, you will display some other text. I will display the text also. So I will give you the what text you should display. So the first thing will be hello world, and then if it exists, it exists. If it does not exist, then you press another button which will change the text. Okay? So that will be the assignment. It's a very simple assignment. By the way, I am posting all the videos links now also on the Moodle. So I am not sending out an email. So if you check out the Moodle now, it has all the presentation and also the links to the YouTube videos. So even this will go to the YouTube. So we looked at very simple program. Now we will go in detail about what that exactly doing and why it is doing that. So CLDC is the basic virtual machine specification and the core set of APIs. Okay? So the virtual machine used in this CLDC is actually called KVM. I don't know what K means, but it's not JVM, it's KVM. It's very compact compared to what you have in desktop. And because of that compactness, there are some limitations on it. So if you are familiar with Java, you will most probably be able to write everything, but there are some things you should be careful of. So first of all, there is no native method. Anybody knows what this means? You cannot invoke native code.
Low-level directory.
Right. So in Java, there is still a way of invoking the native code. So native code as in the code which is there for the architecture. So for example, if there is a Pentium architecture, you can invoke some code which is specific to Pentium. Right? So for example, some Linux code, some C code, compile C code. So you can do this. This is not really Java is meant to do, but Java you can do it. In this particular Java ME version, you can't do that. There is no object finalizer. So object does not have finalize method. Okay? So that's another thing. There is no reflection. Anybody knows what reflection means? For classes. So in Java, what you can do is the classes can reflect. That means if you don't know what are the methods, what are the data types inside a class, you can use an API to find it out at runtime. So usually what happens is when you write the code, you know that this is the class, so that means it has these methods and these are the data, the variables, right? And you can invoke those, all of those. But Java is so powerful that even if you don't know this, you can call reflection. And so reflect means everything gets reflected and in the mirror image you see what are the methods. And then you learn the methods and then you invoke this at runtime. Right? It's a very powerful thing, but you can't do this in Java because the resources are not there. It requires too much complexity to do all those things, so it's not there. So because of that, there is no reflection. There is no class holders. So class loader is not accessible. So that means you can't dynamically load classes. In Java, you can do all of those things. You can dynamically load classes. But in this case, the virtual machine will do all of those things. You in the program cannot load classes. And there is a partial bytecode verifier. Anybody remembers in chapter 2 we have seen this, what this means? Pre-verification. So in the real Java, when you run the code is verified at runtime, whether it is not doing any malicious things or not. In this particular version, it is partially verified at the compile time itself. So when you run it, there is less of verification. These are some of the differences between the standard Java SE and Java ME.
Sir, MITP is the set of APIs for developing a mobile application, or it's like what is
so we have seen it in the first chapter what all of this is. So MIDP is based on CLD. So all of these are specifications. So if you look at in the computer networks, there are layers, right? OSI layers, network layer, physical layer, all these layers. So this is something similar to that. It specifies what is the bottommost layer and what is the layer above it, and so on. So depending upon how many layers you have more functionality. So you can say these are set of APIs at the end. Again, few differences. So Java.lang.string, which is standard thing you would use typically, represent character string, but it does not have all the bells and whistles. So most of the things you can convert from string to number, number to string, all of those things. You have to be careful when you use string now. Like, all of those things may not be possible here. Then, so I will ignore now some of the things because, so memory is often scarce. One important thing is, so you should be careful about string handling. String handling requires a lot of memory. So whenever you are using this class, the string class, you make sure that you minimize the use of it. So you get 1 MB of heap. What is the heap memory? What is the stack memory? Dynamic. So heap is the dynamic. So stack is something when you make function calls. Right? You call a function, you push something onto the stack and then you pop it up. Right? Heap is something which is dynamically allocated. So whole phone will give you typically MSS specifications. If your phone that have more RAM, it will allocate more. But typically, it's something that you can assume is 1 MB, which is not much. Okay? So now when you write code, you are writing the code by considering the memory also. So minimize the number of variables that you use. Optimize on this. So if you have a habit of rapidly creating objects and just ignoring it, you are not supposed to do that, right? Because that will slow down the whole performance of your phone. So there are no, in this particular device, at least 1.0, there is no float and double. So if you are doing operations on these floating point numbers with big decimal digits, you can't do that. So I will ignore this. These are present, so you can do some system calls. You can find out the total heap size, how much memory is free, so all of this is possible. So if you're writing code, a very nice code which you want to deploy, what you can do is, you can keep a tab on how much memory is free and so on, right? In typical standard...
Sir, if it's CITC 1.0, there is no float and double, how do we add the decimal values?
So right, so you have to do something, tricks with the integers only. So as far as possible use integers, and if you're not able to use, then you can divide the whole floating into 2 integers. And it becomes complex, the code becomes complex. But in the latest version, there will be support.
CITC 1.1 that has all types of primitive types of Java SC. It's written.
Sorry, which one?
CITC 1.1.
Right, so which has all the same as Java SC. This is talking about the old one, right? So in the latest version you can, and in fact in the latest 4 it will easily support also. So what I'm saying is, on the old version it was not there, but the takeaway from this slide is, you can actually keep a tab on the memory. You are typically not used to do this, right? In Java SE programs, standard edition programs, you really don't worry about how much memory is free. But now you can write the code and always keep seeing how much memory is free. And depending on that, you can change the code. So you can run the garbage collector manually. Anybody knows what a garbage collection is?
Like if we assign some new instance or make a new instance of a class, and after some time we again make a new instance of a class, then the old instance is the garbage because that cannot be accessed, so that is what garbage is.
Right, right. So whenever you create a class and let's say you go out of that context, right, in the function call, then that something is not, you will not use it unless you enter the function again, but you will create a new instance of it. So the garbage collection is something running in the background and is always collecting this garbage and freeing up the memory for you, which was not there in C. In C there was no garbage collection. So that means you have to do the freeing of memory. And that's why C was little complex for most of the programmers. Because you have to remember when you write the code where to free the memory. But now in Java it's becoming automatic. And you can actually, when you see that you're running out of memory, you can call the garbage collection manually, do something. Typically, so there is a trade-off. How much time you run garbage collection, you get free memory, but then your phone also becomes slow. So you have to do a trade-off between how many times you can run this and how much speed you can reduce down because of this. So coming at the thread. So what is, so thread has something which is common, right? What is, can you remind me? I think he was reminding me once, but for now let's remind me again. What is the thread? What is the difference between a thread and 2 processes? What does it exactly share?
Resources.
Resources, but what? So does it share stack?
Yes. So each thread has their own stack.
Each thread has its own stack, right? So it doesn't share stack. What? Does it share register values? Does it share?
No.
So if it starts sharing register values, it will cause problems, right? So it doesn't share stack and registers. Rest of the things it shares. The code is shared, the data, the heap memory, everything it shares. So it doesn't share stack because every function call has to have a different stack. And then it doesn't also share the register values. Because when you change from one thread to another thread, whatever the code is executing, you should have the same values into the register at that time. So thread works as much as same thing as Java AC. So you don't really have to worry much about the threads. So have you used threads in Java? Have you created threads? So you typically, you can create a thread object and you call a start method and it's a runnable. So I will show the example also. But again, memory, the processing also is very scared on this device. So what happens is with this means you don't create as many threads as you want. So in fact there is a limit of 10 threads in the system. You can't go more than 10 threads. So that's the limit. That doesn't mean you should create 10 threads. I would recommend creating as less threads as possible. Yeah, so it says it's allowed to create 10 threads. So every application is allowed to create only 10 threads. If you go above that, it will give you an error. Then, so many of the methods you will write in your applications are callbacks that your operating system will call you, which means that the thread is owned by the system. The rule about, that's fine, then if you, okay, so this is important thing. At the bottom, when do you use threads? So you have been writing thread programs, right? So when do you use threads? Parallel processing is one example. So can you give me an example of a code, a very standard code where there is a thread? Chatting, yes.
GUI. When you have a
GUI also, right?
And when you're like parallel quick sort.
Parallel quick sort, yeah, that's one example. So whenever there is a parallel processing, one standard examples of threads is
A matrix
multiple clients, right? So if you have taken computer networks course, very standard example of threads is HTTP server. Without threads, HTTP servers wouldn't have been almost possible. Right? So the whole idea of putting threads is because, so HTTP server, what happens is, so there is a server and a client. When a client connects to the server, the HTTP server is listening for these connections on port 80. So when one client comes, it says, okay, I will serve your HTML file, and this is one thread. What happens is, if it doesn't have thread, what it will do, it will keep serving this client, and when the next client comes, it cannot accept that client. Right? Unless you create different processes. But that's not possible because what happens is, multiple processes cannot bind to port 80, only one process can bind to one port. Right? So because of that, the thread is a must there. Without thread is almost not possible. Another example of thread is, you're talking about this, but now in the browsers, you get different tabs. So in Chrome, and everybody now comes with different tabs, and you can open different web pages at the same time in different tabs. So all of that is again threads. So everything becomes one thread, and then Chrome can go to the next tab. So all of these things is the thread. So this is for mostly multiprocessing.
Sir, if there are different threads, then why does the Chrome crash if we open too many tabs?
So sometimes what happens is there is an issue of memory leak. So this was a very common problem with Firefox in the old days. So people have been doing experiments and they find that if you keep running Firefox for a long time, so Firefox and all these programs are written typically in C. And then the question comes about garbage collection. There is no garbage collection, automatic garbage collection. And when you write a very big program, the programmer forgets where he is allocating memory and where he should deallocate. and then that leaks. The memory leak means you create variables, you don't use them, and your amount of RAM that is available free becomes small and small. So that's why it crashes finally. Operating system will kill it. Or it becomes unresponsive. There is some error in it and it becomes unresponsive. When coming back to the phone, it's not about multiprocessing only, because there is typically not much multiprocessing you will do. But if you have something lengthy to do, then you will use threads. Any guesses why lengthy things for thread?
Because if it's lengthy, it will consume more time, means more power. So we use thread so that it takes less time.
No, so it will still take the same time, same power. But what happens is, now if you are in the main thread and you are doing everything, all the lengthy computations in the main thread, your screen will freeze. The main screen that you are seeing will freeze because it's doing something very time consuming, right? And the user will see that, okay, because this, remember I said, the thread that is given to your application is the main thread of the user interface. And operating system wants it back very quickly, right? So if you use the main thread to do everything, it will freeze. And your phone will become unresponsive. So because of that, whenever you see that you want to do something time consuming or lengthy, you put it into, for example, a network connection. You want to connect to the google.com, download all the Google results, the search results, you put it into another thread. So that your main thread is not time consuming. So, you all know about streams. Right? So whenever you read and write files, open network connections for HTTP, IP, Bluetooth, any network connections, you will use the stream class. So whatever streams you have opened, make sure that you close them. Otherwise the phone will again go into a crashing mode. Or use finally to make sure that the stream gets closed. So I will give you an example of finally. Have you used finally?
Yes.
So for those who have not used, so this is one code without using finally, and this is another code. So what this does is, it creates, so there is a try and catch. So if there is an exception, there is an error condition, you will handle the exception here. So in the try mode, you create this, you open the network stream, you read data from it, and you close it. Right? So what happens if while reading the data, something goes wrong? Right. So what happens is, in this particular case, if anything goes wrong while reading the data, you will handle the exception and your in.close is here. Right? So we close the connection here. And that doesn't get closed because you come directly here. So that's the problem with this. From the right hand side, instead if you write the code like this, and I put the finally statement here, that guarantees me that regardless of it's an error or a good thing, it will always execute this one. Right? That way the code is not also duplicated. If I had put this statement here, I could have done this. But then it becomes duplication of code. So with just one piece of code, I will make sure that in the good and the bad scenario, the network connection gets closed. And you have rest of the same things you all know about. Right? So date, and I would recommend using all of this, because what happens is, when you use this, the phone has its own way to show the dates. Just like in HTML forms nowadays, you can show the dates. Whenever you want to fill in the date, you can actually see a small calendar popping up. Right? So if you use the standard things in the phone, like date, calendar, time zone, then it becomes the UI standard. And then the user gets a feel of the same thing happening across multiple applications. So he's aware of this. So I would recommend you using all of these things when you design your projects and assignments. So vectors and stack you all know, so I will not go in detail. Hash tables. What is hash?
Key value pair.
Key value, right? So whenever you want to search something, a big number, then what you can do is you can hash it. So when you store it, it becomes compact, but then when you search it also, it becomes very easy to search it. Right? So this is hash. Enumeration, whenever you want to create a list of all the values, use enumeration. None of these collections are multi-thread sets. So if you're using multi-threading, you will have to take care of synchronization. Then there is random. So all of these things, it's very easy. So So these are the 4 APIs of MIDP. So after this, I think you can write your first program, Hello World program. So I would recommend you download it, download the SDK, write the Hello World program. I will also post the assignment that I talked about. And all of these things are available, language, IO, utilities. And this, most of the APIs you will see is similar to the standard program, but there are some differences. So any questions about this? Before going to the next one, so I'll take a break of 5 minutes. So we'll just break out and then come back after 5 minutes. So the software in the Java that is on the virtual machine that is handling all the midlets, it's called Application Management Software, AMS. Its task is to look at your application, load it, execute it, install it, and handle it. So everything is done by AMS software. So you all know that whenever you start an application, first of all the virtual machine will look for the .class file. It will create an instance of that .class file and it will call the startup method, which we have already seen. When it's time for exit, again it will call the destroy app and then you get the chance to clean up, and after that the AMS software will do all the rest of the cleanup. So for example, if it has allocated some memory to run in the heap, it will do all that cleaning up here. It also handles installing and removing of midlets. So one thing is to run your code, but before even doing that, you have to install your code, right? And we'll see the installation process also. So it has to take this code, see which are the compatible things, is it compatible with the phone, it installs it at the right place and so on. It shows up the user interface icon and it puts it in the menu. So all of these steps are for installing the software. So AMS software will also handle installation, and if you decide to uninstall or remove it, it will also take care of this. So this diagram we have already drawn in a class before. If some of you have been missing in that class, so these are the 3 states in the total life cycle of a midlet. It's an active state, that's the most common state, and then there is a destroyed, which is terminated, and then a pause state. So in the beginning you are in the active state, and then you can go to the pause state by if the AMS calls pause app. In that you go to the pause. And then after that, again you can come with the start tab to here, to the active state.
So it's saying that it creates a midlet from the pause state. So is that those pause state or active state?
So in the previous class, I told you about that it's an active state, right? So whenever it first creates, it's an active state. So let me see the exact thing, but what maybe this thing is doing, it's in the pause state, and then it calls the first time it's the start tab and you come to the active state, and at that instance you know that you can find out whether you are being initialized or you are coming from the resume pause state, right? So syntactically it's still saying the same thing, it's not saying something different. This is just that the pause state is little different. It has been paused but without going to the active state. There are 2 types of pause. One is you go to the active and then pause, which is different, and then you go to the pause and then active, which is different, right? So this pause doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? So you can even come here directly. Okay? So syntactically both the things are the same. There isn't difference. Okay, then in both the states, in the pause state and in the active state, from both these states, you can jump to the destroyed state, when it gets destroyed. So these are the only 3 possible states, there is no other state. So what you do typically in pause and destroy at any time. When a midlet is pause, shut down, you can shut down any media player. So for example, if you are playing MP3 songs and network connections, you can release as much as possible, but you won't release everything because you are still in a pause state, you are not in the destroyed state, right? So whatever is going to consume too much CPU and so on, you can eliminate all of those things as possible. If it's destroyed, you have to shut down everything and then release the system. So this is the 2 things you will take care of. In the start tab, as we discussed, it can be called multiple times. Even though the name says start, it's not only called at the start. It will be called multiple times throughout the life cycle. So you have to make sure that you are not performing the initialization code again and again. So you can declare some kind of a flat variable that will save the value about whether it's being called for the first time or multiple times. Right? So with that variable, you can find it out. There is another thing which is unconditional argument in the destroy. So if you look at the destroyer, there is something called Boolean unconditional. What this means is the AMS systems gives you a chance. Right? So if the unconditional argument is true, that means the midlet will be shut down no matter what. But otherwise, what it is saying is the AMS is giving you a chance to rescue yourself. So if it is true, that means it will be destroyed, no questions. But otherwise, you can create you can throw an exception, midlet state change exception, and tell the AMS that I don't want to be destroyed right now. So there are two ways of killing the application. One is the clean kill, where you just kill it for some reason and then there is no questions. Otherwise, it gives you a chance to say, okay, I don't want to be killed for now, for some reason. Because let's say you are waiting for some data to. So for example, if you are doing a banking transaction, right, and you don't want to terminate that connection right now, and operating system gives you, or AMS gives you a chance to rescue yourself, then you can tell AMS that I don't want to be killed for now, and let me live, and because for that you just throw this exception, and then you will live. So there is a way to avoid destroying of application. So I say most of these codes is all callback methods, but there are some things that you can call. So for example, you can also change your state on your own. The application can change from one state to another state on its own. So for example, an active that wishes to enter the pause state. So if your application is active and AMS is not calling the pause, you yourself want to pause. What you can do is you can say notify pause to AMS. So you are telling AMS that notify pause. So that means now you can pause yourself. The difference is now AMS will not call the pause up and you. It's your duty to do all these housekeeping things for the pause and then go into the pause state. Is the difference clear? So what I'm saying is, not only it's all callback, you can also, the application can also change states, and if it wants to go from active to pause, it can do that, but it has to notify AMS about the changing. You cannot just change the state on its own. So you tell AMS that I want to be paused, and it will immediately be paused. So before going into, or before calling this method, one way is to just call pause app yourself, do all the housekeeping things, and then you notify pause. And the application will be in the pause state. So this you can do. Same thing you can do with the destroy. So application can itself from active state can go to destroy state. You can say notify destroy and it will be destroyed. Okay? So the application also has control about its state changes. There is one thing. A pause midlet can attempt to wake itself. How can a pause midlet will it's paused? How will it wake up itself? Right, so there are some threads. So there is one thread which is in the control of AMS, right? And that thread is not in your control. So that thread cannot do anything, you are paused. But there could be some threads running in the background which are running, which are not paused. And that pause state can actually invoke the application and put it back into receive or active. Okay? So this is another powerful way of calling yourself or waking up yourself. Then you can use a lot of system properties and system methods. So for example, if you want to show a page, so for example in the email, or if you're looking at your email on your phone and there is a URL, right? So if you click on that URL, what that basically is doing is it's calling the platform request method, and that means it is telling the phone to show this URL in its own browser. So you can use all of these methods to display a URL, a web page, or even make a phone call. So for example, this is the request. So for example, if let's say in this email there is a number and you know it's a telephone number. So you can just say platform request and then you say telephone and put the number here, and then the phone call will be made. Right? So now programmatically you can dial up a number. Right? So now these are the simple things you can do and use the functions built inside the phone. So similarly you can send and receive SMS messages and so on. It becomes very easy now. Now, as you see in the last thing I said, you can make a phone call number. And this is an international number, let's say. Now, do you want any application installed on your phone to make and dial these numbers? Or send SMS messages, send URL requests, right? So it becomes now very challenging. What is possible, what's not possible. So, and that's where the challenge is for Java. And that is where the protection domains are. So a lot of things are protected and they are not allowed for the common people to do. For example, every Midlink suite that you install, every Java application that you will install on your phone will lie inside a protected domain. So phone will make sure that it goes into the right domain. And we'll see what are different domains. But before going into different domains, a protection domains determines what applications are allowed for the Midlink. Depending upon which protection domain you are allowed to do something. So for example, connecting to the network, connecting to the banking site, reading a file, you have all your phone contacts information, you have all your SMS messages, email messages, and you don't want any application that you download from the internet to look at all of this information, right? So phone will have domains and assign authority to take all these actions. So whenever a Midlink attempts a sensitive operation, so we'll see all of these are sensitive operations, looking at your file, looking and dialing a number, we'll consult whether this operation is allowed or not, or denied. Okay? And if it's allowed, it will only be allowed to do it. So there are some things where user will be prompted. So you will get a prompt, say this and this operation is, so remember I showed you an example of sending an SMS in the last class, where I got a security prompt saying that this application is trying to send an SMS message, whether you want to allow this or not. So this will be asked to the user as a permission. If user allows it, it will be allowed. If user doesn't allow, it will not be allowed. Right? And there are different ways of asking permission. There is one way where permission is asked every time. Every time you make a sensitive thing, it will be asked as a permission. Another way is you just ask permission once. For example, in Windows, you see that this application is trying to perform this security operation. You want to allow it. You can do it once or you can do it multiple times, right? So another thing is, once you allow it to that application, it will be allowed to do it for its lifetime. So this is one way. Another way is you cryptographically sign this application. Anybody knows what signing is?
MD5 signature. MD5 message.
Signing and attaching a certificate.
Certificate, right. So where is it used typically? An example in real life where you have seen that there is a signing, there is a certification.
Online
transactions.
Online transactions. So all the online transactions, they will have HTTPS. So what that S means, anybody knows what S means? Secure. But how is it handled? Certification. So for example, there is a certification authority called VeriSign. What happens is, you take this URL and go to this authority and say, okay, this is my URL, and you sign it. So it will verify whether this bank is the real bank and this has this ICICI, let's say bank.com URL. It will sign it and give you a certificate. Now next time if some client visits or a customer visits this banking website, it will be, the banking website will give you the certificate. Now there is a key installed in your browser for VeriSign, which is the public key of VeriSign, right? And that certificate is signed by the private key of VeriSign. Now when you see the certificate, you can decrypt it using the public key in your browser, and it will, if it matches whatever is written, you see, and inside the certificate it is written that this IP address and this URL is given to ICICI, right? And your browser says, okay, the certificate is, and whatever I am seeing in the URL, it's matching, so this is fine. So this is how it is done. You can do the same thing on the applications on your phone. So you can, let's say you developed an application and you go to Nokia and tell, okay, this is my application, this is the code, and this is what it does. and I want to make international phone calls using this application. And I want this permission. So if Nokia is satisfied with your authority, I mean, you say the application is not doing anything malicious, it will just make these phone calls and it is fine, it will sign it. And once it is signed and it's installed on your phone, then it can make these phone calls. Right? So that is one way to get some protection from the manufacturer. So what are typically the domains that you have on your phone? On the phone there is called unidentified third party or totally untrusted. It's the same thing. So whatever applications you will develop in your programming assignments, all of this will lie here. Right? It's untrusted, it's third party application. So it may deny permission and or prompt user for every attempted sensitive operation. Right? So in your application there will be lots of permission asked. Another one is manufacturer or operator, which is coming from, let's say, Nokia, or in terms of the operator is Airtel or Vodafone. Okay? So all of these applications are little more privileged. So these are signed using the keys derived from manufacturer and operator. So for example, Nokia, Airtel, Vodafone, they will sign this application. So they do, so for Nokia, there is no testing, but for Vodafone and Airtel, Nokia will do some testing and then only put this application. Now this is more privileged than this. In fact, this is the highest privilege. Whatever applications are in this category, so your phone is coming up with some keys installed, some public keys installed. And all of the certificates with this, all the applications with this certificate are most privileged. After that, it's identified third party. And this is where the VeriSign and all these agencies come in. So let's say you want to do a business using an application. You want to sell your application. What you can do is, you can go to this third party, like VeriSign, and get your application signed. Now that doesn't mean that you cannot do any malicious things. If you get a certification from VeriSign, doesn't mean that you cannot do malicious things. What does it mean?
It is not tested. It is not tested like
No, it is really not tested.
Yeah.
But there is a certificate and you can do more. So what is the security now?
VeriSign is verified that some bank or something,
So very-
just put a case on that.
Right. So what happens is you are identified now. Right? So if anything malicious happens on the phone, VeriSign has a way to catch you. That's the only guarantee now. VeriSign is not going to look at your code in detail and say, okay, this is fine, this is fine, this is not good. You can still do malicious thing. But it's just that now it's very easy for them, the investigating agency, to catch you. Right? So that is the security you are getting. It's a third party. So it involves some money, because to get certificate, you have to show your identity, show your bank account, everything, and then only you. So you need to spend money. And there is another way, which is not mentioned here, is, so for example, you develop an application and you want to put it on your phone and do all the sensitive things. For example, sending SMS, making international calls. So there is a way to go to Nokia website, and there is a unique number with every phone. Anybody knows what that number is called? IMEI number, right? So that IMEI number, if you give to Nokia, then they can sign that application for just that IMEI number. Now that means you is taking all the authority of saying, okay, for this IMEI, I am allowed to use this application and do whatever I want. Right? So that's one way of signing it just for your phone. Just for your phone, then you can do anything using that application. That's another way. But otherwise, the three security domains are like. So you can also fake this signature. There is a way in all these IDs. So for example, in the older version of WTK and even in the 3.0 version, you can compile your code and then go to the properties of that project and you can sign it. Right? So with this signature, and then you transfer the signature also to the phone, you can sign your own application for just that phone, right? And it will run. So it's very easy. If you want to do that, you can do that. So what are the permissions typically and what are the domains? So every sensitive operation has a name, corresponding permission name. And so for example, if this is, if you want to make an HTTP connection, this is the permission name, connector.htp. Right? So a protection domain is basically a list of all these permissions. So one protection domain will say, okay, phone number, dialing a number, HTTP request, and so on. So every protection domain has these permissions. Any permission that is now allowed is not listed. So for example, not allowed is not listed. So there is a typo here. So if it's not listed, that means that permission is not allowed in that particular domain. So that what happens is whenever you try to do an operation, it now becomes really slow. It has to consult this permission domain, find out whether that is listed or not. If it is listed, then only allow it. So that's why in the phone, it becomes little slower in Java. Right? All of this. And this is the same thing for Androids, this is the same thing for iOS, no matter whichever you are using. So in Android, anybody knows what is there is also virtual machine, by the way. Anybody knows the name of that virtual machine in Android? Dalvik. It's called DVM, Dalvik Virtual Machine. It's also derived from Java, and that's where there is a big case going on in US every code that who owns this virtual machine, because Android actually took this from Java and give it a different name, and they are now selling these devices, but actually it is Java, right? So it's called Dalvik Virtual Machine. The same thing happens there also, protection domains and everything. So depending upon what is the permission, you can get a prompt, or otherwise once you get a prompt you can say yes there, or every time you can keep saying yes. So you can handle permissions at runtime or at the installation time. At runtime means when you run the code, you will get this request and then you say yes or no, right? So that is all runtime. Installation time means user will be asked that this is the application and these are the permissions, whether you want to install this application and allow these permissions. If you say yes, then at that instance itself you get all the permission and you can run executing. Or otherwise at runtime the code has to do the check and then do every operation. So you have a choice, either you do it everything at runtime or at installation time. So, of course, signing costs money. Signing is mostly to avoid user prompts, of course, but then it's a time-consuming process. So, I would recommend that when you write the operations, so for example, if you want to store something, file connection is a sensitive operation. So, you will get lots of prompts and so on, right? So, instead of file connection, you use a store API. There is something called report store API. So you typically use that to store anything which is persistent, right? Instead of storing it in the file connection. So that's how you can have less number of prompts to the user and also avoid signing if you want to sign. So what we saw today is, we saw different states, paused, active and destroyed. AMS is the software that handles all of these states and moves you from one state to another state. Also, as an application, you can move from one state to another state by notifying. Then you can send platform requests to make phone calls, send SMS, use browser and so on. You can also install midlet, right? So if you want to, one midlet wants to install another midlet, you can also do that by using platform request. Every midlet will live in its own protection domain. There are 3 protection domains. One is the totally untrusted, that's what you write. One is the maker, manufacturer or the operator. And the third one is the signed one. So if you get a certification, you can be in the third one. And depending on, and everybody has its own limits and what it can do. And then a midlet suite can use descriptor attributes to specify what permission it wants. So the jar, we talked about the jar, description of the jar files. So you can put all the permission requests there. So at the installation time itself, user will know which permission it needs to grant. Or you can do it at the runtime. You install the software and then at runtime you have to check for the permission. And depending upon what permissions you have, then you can. Okay. So any questions on this? In this one. Okay. So I will post the assignment this week probably. First assignment, programming assignment. Second thing I am going to do is next class I will talk about all the possible projects. Okay. So projects that I can think of, and then you can look at all those projects, ask me questions and select it. If you already have any project in mind, please also think about it and come prepared. And then we can discuss about the projects in the next class. So today we'll stop here.